What if I told you Porsche built an engine that was never meant to exist? One small change inside and the entire engine behaves differently. And sometimes all it takes is one extra stroke to change everything. Today, we're breaking down how Porsche's 6-stroke engine works. Condition 5 adds an extra compression and power stroke. Traditional engines follow 4 strokes, air comes in, gets squeezed, burns, and then everything gets pushed out. But Porsche's 6-stroke engine still does that first part, but it didn't stop there. They added not just one, but another compression and an extra power stroke. Now you might be thinking, why extra strokes? That just makes it complicated, right? And does more parts usually mean more trouble? Here's the point. Those extra strokes don't just do the same thing again. They change how the energy is used and how much of it actually matters. In a normal engine, once the fuel burns, the piston gets one strong push, and that's basically it. And after that, the exhaust opens and all that hot gas just leaves, along with energy that could have done more. But Porsche didn't let that happen. After the first power stroke, the exhaust stays shut, the piston comes back up again, and those hot gases get squeezed one more time. And when you compress hot gas, the temperature rises even higher, which is the key here. That extra heat isn't wasted, it's used to trigger a second controlled burn. Not a full new explosion, just enough to release what was left. That creates another push on the piston before anything exits the cylinder. 2 useful pushes from the same intake of fuel. So the engine isn't working harder, it's working smarter. More pressure turns into motion, less heat slips away, and that's why this extra stroke actually changes everything. So now the engine isn't just burning fuel, it's finishing the job properly. And that leads straight into the next feature. What's interesting is that none of this was done to impress anyone. There's no special feature here, and that usually means Porsche was solving a problem most people never even notice. Condition 4. 2 power pushes per engine cycle. In a normal 4-stroke engine, the piston helps turn the crank once every cycle. 1 power stroke, then 3 strokes that don't make power. That means the crank spends most of its time just waiting for the next explosion. So what happens when the piston pushes twice instead of once? Does that just add noise, or does it actually change how the engine feels? With the 6-stroke, the crank gets hit with power more often. 2 real pushes in the same cycle, and that changes the rhythm of the engine completely. In a normal engine, there's a push, then a pause. The crank spins on momentum alone for a while, and you can feel that gap, especially at lower speeds. But here, that gap gets smaller, and the next push comes sooner, so rotation never really drops off. The crank doesn't have to wait for help, it stays under load more of the time, and that makes everything feel tighter. The throttle response becomes more predictable, and the engine doesn't jump forward and then relax, it just keeps moving. This also changes how vibrations behave, because forces are spread out instead of arriving all at once. That is, less shock per event and more balance through the cycle. At steady speeds, the engine feels calmer, and under load, it feels more controlled. Not too jumpy or lazy. It's not louder. It's not aggressive. That smooth, continuous character isn't tuning or software. It comes straight from how often the crank is being driven. And that only happens because of the extra stroke. That smoother rhythm doesn't just help the driver. It changes what the engine goes through every time it turns. So just a quick time out, guys. Before we move on to the rest of the video, could we ask you for a small favor? If you're enjoying this so far, it really helps if you hit like and subscribe. Over 98% of viewers watch our videos without subscribing. It costs you absolutely nothing, but it is a really huge help to us. Thanks. Condition 3. Safer power delivery. Under load. When power comes in all at once, you feel it coming out of a corner, or when power hits the wheels too fast. So what happens when power doesn't arrive in big spikes? What if it comes in smaller, more frequent pushes instead? Does that actually make the car easier to control? With 2 power pushes per cycle, force builds more gradually, so the drivetrain doesn't get shocked, and the tires aren't suddenly asked to do everything at once. Instead of one big hit, the load arrives in smaller steps, which gives the chassis time to settle before the next push comes in. That smoother delivery matters more than people realize. When power comes on gently, the driver has more time to react, even if they don't consciously notice it. Steering corrections feel natural, throttle inputs feel corrected, and the car doesn't make small mistakes. Traction stays predictable, and weight transfer feels calmer, especially when accelerating out of corners or merging hard onto a road. In low grip situations, this difference becomes obvious. On damp or loose surfaces, sudden torque can lose grip without warning. Here, the car doesn't drift away, it stays intact. And the best part is, none of this relies on the electronics of the vehicle. It's pure mechanical behavior happening from the start. The engine itself is easier to manage, and when power is easier to manage, the car becomes safer without the control going away from the driver. Condition 2. Cleaner exhaust and better emission control. Modern engines don't just have to make power, they have to control what comes out of the exhaust, and that's harder than it sounds. Exhaust gases leave the engine extremely hot and uneven, coming in pulses that emission systems struggle to smooth out, especially right after combustion. So what happens when exhaust doesn't rush out in one violent burst? What if it leaves the engine in a more controlled, consistent way? Can that actually help emissions without choking performance? With the 6-stroke design, the burn doesn't end in a rush, finishes its job properly before the exhaust even starts. The pressure eases out instead of dropping suddenly, heat settles down, and the gases leave not all at once, but slowly. And that small change matters more than it sounds because now the emission system isn't catching up. The catalytic converter stays in its comfort zone, even when the engine is being pushed hard, even when things get messy. So instead of cleaning up a problem after it happens, the engine just behaves better from the start. No tricks, no software tricks, just cleaner exhaust, leaving the engine naturally, and honestly, that's the smart way to do it. And once you step back from the mechanics and look at the bigger picture, this engine starts to mean something more than just clever engineering. Condition 1. Porsche's commitment to high-performance vehicles. The car world is changing fast, with more screens, more software, and quieter cars everywhere. And for a lot of brands, performance now feels more like something you see than something you feel. But Porsche has never really been comfortable with that, because for them, driving has always been about the performance and feel. So when regulations get tighter and engines start getting pushed out, what does a brand like Porsche actually do? Do you abandon high-performance driving? Can you protect driving feel and still move forward? The 6-stroke engine is Porsche, making their stance clear. They're not willing to let high-performance cars slowly disappear as the world changes. So instead of patching things up with software or fake tricks, they're reworking the engine itself to survive what's coming. Rather than replacing feel with screens or artificial sound, Porsche goes back to combustion, to how power is made and how it reaches the driver. The goal isn't louder cars or pretending something is fast, it's keeping response real, keeping character alive, keeping that mechanical connection you can actually feel through the wheel and the pedal. This engine isn't about nostalgia or holding on to the past. Porsche isn't running away from change, they're carrying real driving with them into whatever comes next, on their own terms. If this changed how you look at engines, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We break down ideas like this all the time, the ones that don't follow the rules but actually make sense. And let us know in the comments what you think about Porsche keeping performance alive, then jump into the next video here on the channel.